bear with us, we'll queue up the PowerPoint, the slide deck for F1669.
Good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear me? All good? All right. So the case before you tonight is F1669. Petitioner is Jennifer Joad, James Martin Serber III, James Martin Serber Jr., Julia Wall, and the Wall family of North Carolina, LLC. The site itself is 128.54 acres, located at the northwestern side of Bethania Rural Hall Road, north of Tobaccoville Road, the terminus of Glade Street. The petitioners are requesting a special use rezoning from residential single family, a minimum of 20,000 square lot size, and general industrial to limited industrial special use for the purpose of developing a hyperscale data center. Looking at the overall county map, you can see that the property is located in GMA 3, Growth Management Area 3, suburban neighborhoods. It is currently on an unincorporated parcel of land surrounded by the town of Rural Hall. Looking at the site itself, you can see that the vast majority of the site is zoned RS20 with a small portion, a small portion at the northeast corner, zoned GI. See Bethania Rural Hall Road running against the southeastern portion of the property and Glade Street connecting to the northeast corner of the subject property. In terms of surrounding zoning, the property is surrounded by GI General Industrial, GI and GIS General Industrial, your industrial special use on the north and northwest sides of the property. However, to the southwest, southeast and east, it is surrounded by a mixture of single-family residential, light commercial and institutional uses, including Rural Hall Town Hall across the street here, as well as Nazareth Lutheran Church. Shortly to the east of the subject property is downtown Rural Hall, as well as the downtown Rural Hall Activity Center. Looking at an aerial image of the subject property, overall it has gently sloping topography with fields, tree stands, and currently 4 single-family homes. There are 2 existing farm ponds intended to remain, and you have Beaver Dam Creek emanating from the southwestern portion of the property, flowing into the northernmost farm pond, as well as a few tributaries in the same area. There's also a 150-foot Duke power easement with transmission lines running north-south through the property that connect to the existing substation directly north. Looking at the area recommendation of the Rural Hall area plan update, they recommend mixed-use development. The proposed development does not comply with the area plan, and that proposes a large single-scale high-impact use that would limit the opportunity for future integration of the site into the adjacent activity center, as mentioned previously, shortly to the east. Looking at some photos of the subject property, this first photo is looking north from Bethania Rural Hall Road into the subject property, approximately where the main entrance will be located. Here's a picture looking south along Bethania Rural Hall Road at the Rural Hall Town Hall, as mentioned earlier. Here's a picture looking east along Bethania Rural Hall Road. The subject property is on the left. You can see a single-family home and an institutional use that would border the subject property. The next picture here is looking northwest on Glade Street. If you recall, that is the road that is connecting to the northeast corner of the site. The development will be located over these trees here. You can see the existing single-family nature of the road as well. And in addition, we have put in the condition that Glade Street is to be used for emergency access only to the subject property. Here's another picture looking at the northern terminus of Glade Street where the secondary entrance is proposed. This would lead into the subject property. And here's a picture looking east from Glade Street at downtown Rural Hall, emphasizing the proximity of this proposed development to the downtown and its activity center. Furthermore, here's a picture looking north into the subject property from north of Nazareth Lutheran Church. This is the southernmost farm pond that is intended to remain. And the picture also shows, if you look in the background, one of the existing single-family homes currently on property. Here's a picture looking north into the subject property. This is where the data center buildings, the outdoor equipment, and the interior driveways will be located. And the final picture, looking north in the subject property, here's a excellent explicit view of the 150-foot Duke power easement running north-south throughout the property. With its power lines in the distance, you can see the current substation directly north of the subject property. Now let's take a little look at the proposed site plan itself. First thing to mention is that there are 3 proposed data center buildings, one on the northwest, northeast, and east central portions of the subject property. Each building is 2 floors, with all 3 buildings combined being over 1.1 million total square feet of data center. The proposed primary entrance is from Bethania Rural Hall Road, with the secondary entrance being from Glade Street. Once again, there is the condition that is emergency use only. Both entrances are secured with gated access, and as you can see here, with a guardhouse, the main entry. The entrances lead into internal driveways throughout the site that connect and circle the data center buildings. And finally, for this slide, there are parking areas adjacent to each building in compliance with our UDO, 27 spaces on the north and south of each structure. Now, taking a look at the proposed building elevations, these buildings are proposed to be tilt-up concrete buildings with centrally located loading docks, you can see by my indication here, at the rear of each building. The exterior materials are mostly insulated metal panel wall systems with brick veneer segments. Each building is approximately 80 feet in height. 80 feet in height. Next section that I want to look at is the proposed outdoor equipment that is associated with this use and with this development. There is, as you see by this crossed hashed area here, shows the proposed location of these these ground-based outdoor equipment units, which do face internally to the property away from single-family homes. In total, there are 135 ground-mounted outdoor equipment units, 27 for building 3 in the northwest portion of the property, with buildings 1 and 2 each having 54 proposed ground-mounted outdoor equipment units. Additionally, there are rooftop outdoor equipment units that will be screened by enclosures on the roofs that bring the total height of the buildings up to that approximate 80 feet, which I will show you on the following slide. Finally, as part of the slide, there's a proposed 8-foot tall metal perimeter fence visible from the public right-of-way and residential zone property. So, taking a look at these elevations once again, you can see that this gray line at the top of the building indicates the louvered enclosures meant to screen the rooftop equipment units from ground view. You can also see these 34-foot high walls indicated by these dark gray panels that are meant to help abate the potential effects of the outdoor ground equipment units. And finally, here's a standard image of the gate that would be proposed. In addition, here are typicals of both the rooftop equipment units put at the top of the slide and the ground equipment units put here on the bottom of this slide. And the final aspect we want to talk about is the environmental features of the site. As mentioned earlier, there are 2 existing farm ponds to remain, both here in light blue. The southern ones proposed to serve as a potential buffer against the existing single family. With these dark blue ponds, there are 4 new stormwater ponds proposed, with the condition of no on-site cooling being available. There is 1 proposed creek crossing of Beaver Dam Creek. You can see here with the internal driveways connecting building to building. And finally, in compliance with the UDO, the developers are proposing a 10-foot street yard along Bethania Rural Hall Road, as well as a 40-foot type 3 buffer yard against all other areas of the property to the south, west, and east, except to the north, which is already zoned GI. So, in summary, staff has worked with the developer to propose several prescriptive conditions of approval that have the potential to mitigate the effects of the development, which include facing the ground equipment inwards, noise studies, no open loop cooling, etc. However, the scale of intensity of the proposed use could result in significant off-site impacts. Despite these conditions, we recognize the concerns regarding the 80-foot buildings next to residential homes, potential noise issues, the potential energy and utility consumption of this project, and the potential impact that would have on residents and the surrounding town itself. Next point is that the proposal is inconsistent with the Rural Hall Areas Plan Updates recommendation for mixed-use development of the subject property. As stated earlier, this is a large, high-intensity use that would not be well integrated with the existing downtown Rural Hall Activity Center shortly to the east. And finally, the request is inconsistent with the recommendation of Forward 2045 to protect neighborhoods from inappropriate non-residential encroachment, once again going back to potential off-site impacts that this development could provide. Therefore, though the site plan does meet UDO requirements, staff does recommend denial of this request. Finally, I do want to mention that recent conversations between staff and developers, we have spoke with them to add this condition on the list of approved conditions that would go through, that they would sign and move forward with on this project. And that's all for me. Happy to take any questions.
Yeah, I think what we'll do, if there are any questions specific to the staff presentation on this, clarifying type questions, if you want to go ahead and ask those. Otherwise, other questions for staff will hold our discussion. That's
before everyone here, myself included. Perfect. There we go. Thank you. Speaking. Okay.
Is the light green?
I'm colorblind. Okay, sorry. Would you specifically define for everyone what's meant by outdoor equipment unit?
Sure. Let me go back to that.
All the ground-based stuff are generators. All
Mr. Chairman,
rooftop are chillers.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably a better question for the development team.
Okay,
We know that the rooftop equipment are air handling units. We think that the majority of the ground equipment are generators, but there could be some air handling units there too. We're not 100% sure, so I would prefer to defer to the developer on that.
Thank you.
any other clarifying questions before we get ready to get started on our public hearing?
I have a question, but I don't know if it should be helpful later, so I'll just go ahead and ask it. You can tell me if you want to push it back. And thank you for that overview, Mr. Howard. That was great. In the staff report, in the back and forth with the petitioner, there was a deadline of May 28th for reuse and decommissioning narrative. Has that been submitted?
Well, they have provided a narrative. It should be in your agenda packet.
It was in the agenda packet, okay. And then my second question has to do with the jurisdictional determination of the wetlands and streams on the property and the status of the Army Corps of Engineers, speaking into that sort of any federal regulation, and just how we as a board should be thinking about not knowing the full extent of environmental constraints on the property. Is that a now question or is that a later question?
I think that might be a later question.
Okay.
That actually might be a somewhat other than else question.
Okay.
I mean, I don't mean that to sound flippant, but, basically, from a planning staff perspective, we run the interdepartmental review team, and, we have our erosion control, stormwater, folks review this, but, things that lie with the Army Corps of Engineers related to stormwater determination, wetlands determinations, all of those kind of things lie outside of our review process. If there is a requirement that they have to do something, different types of state and federal permits related to that, that's something that they are legally responsible for doing, but doesn't fall within the purview of things that we have a checklist on, unless it's something specifically related to the stormwater or the erosion control permit that gets issued. Sometimes they do require, if they know there's going to be a stream crossing and they're disturbing a certain amount, they can say, all right, we know you've got to have, your wetlands and, stream disturbance permits, and I'm sure Ms. Smith can probably give the numbers of what those various permits are, but, so there are some checks and balances, but anything like that, ultimately the responsibility lies with the developer.
I'll save that for the petitioner, thank you.
Yeah, I would just say there's a lot of water on the site in terms of the streams and buffers and ponds that are gonna be impacted, yes or no? Sorry, should say that there's a lot of water on the site in terms of that, so that's a reasonable thing to ask, and it would have to be evaluated as the site is developed for that.
And a question, but more so a confirmation. As the planning board, we are here to, one, determine if this is consistent or inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. And then also to make a determination of approval or denial with that recommendation to the county commissioners, given the land use, general design, and I guess you could say impact to a degree of the neighboring community, correct?
That is correct. In other words, you can consider things that you think will be impactful, but generally speaking, from a planning board perspective, we're looking at, how it aligns with the comprehensive plan, how it aligns with any adopted area plans, how it, whether or not it's compatible with the surrounding land uses, and then if there are impacts that can be addressed via conditions of approval related to the specific, things that the planning board has purview over, you can have reasonable conditions of approval related to it to mitigate impacts, but generally speaking, taking into account tax value and those kind of things, that's really not a land use consideration. That will be more of a public policy consideration of the elected body whenever they're making their determination. We really should concentrate on land use and compatibility with the surrounding properties and not get into larger policy decisions.
Okay, just want to establish a foundation for all of our neighbors and friends over here.
Sure, and that's a great segue, actually. Before we begin the public hearing on this, we need to address just a few housekeeping matters. This case has obviously generated a good bit of public interest, and before we begin, on behalf of this board and the planning staff, I just want to thank all of you who have taken time to provide written comments on this matter, and or attend this hearing, or you may be watching from home or in an overflow room. Whether you support or oppose this request, it's really critical to the fabric of our society that we take seriously the right to be heard on matters that are important to us. So thank you for participating in this process, regardless of what side you're approaching it from. The first issue we need to address from a housekeeping standpoint is the amount of time allowed for public comment on this case. As you heard at the beginning of the meeting, we generally allow 12 minutes for both sides in a rezoning matter to comment on the case. However, this board has customarily voted to extend those timeframes when matters such as this generate a high volume of interest. So before we move forward, what's the pleasure of the board with regard to any expansion of time for comment on this matter?
I'd recommend we double it.
All right, that would be 24 minutes per side. Is that a motion, Mr. Lane?
Yes, it is.
All right. Second by Mr. Patino. Any discussion on doubling the time to 24 minutes per side with no rebuttal period? All right. All in favor of that motion, sign of aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. With That's unanimous, that was easy enough. Second issue we need to discuss is one of decorum during this public hearing. This board has been appointed by the Forsyth County Board of Commissioners and the Winston-Salem City Council to provide recommendations to those bodies as to matters related to land use and zoning. And I can assure you that every single one of the folks sitting up here take that responsibility incredibly seriously. For us to effectively consider this matter, we need to be able to hear and focus on the comments being made by members of planning staff, speakers from the floor who have been recognized by the chair, and comments by one another. We cannot do that if there are comments being made from the gallery or other forms of demonstration or disruption occur. That behavior will not be tolerated, and if it occurs, you'll be asked to leave the chamber immediately. At the end of our hearing on this matter today, some of the folks here are going to be pleased and others are not. That's understandable given the type of issues we're dealing with. I will remind you though, as stated at the beginning of this matter, that this is not the final decision. This board is not the final arbiter as to these issues, and that decision will rest with the Forsyth County Board of Commissioners, and they'll consider this matter in our recommendation in a future meeting. So you will have another opportunity to be heard regardless of your position at that meeting. So, with that housekeeping out of the way, we'll open the public hearing on this matter. I'll remind you again, before addressing the board, please give us your name, address, and zip code for the record. Signed up in support, we've got James Knox, Michael Fors, and Nathan Wright. So you'll have 24 minutes. It's up to you how you want to divide that up.